So not so long ago, Gibson relaunched the ES-330, a design that's been in the company since the late 50s. It originally ran from the late 50s until the early 70s, and it's occasionally been reissued. So with all the hype and buzz around this guitar, I thought I'd dig mine out, give it a play, and share with you some of my favourite sounds and why I prefer this guitar to its brother, the Gibson 335. Just before we begin the video, I'd like to tell you about a free beginner jazz guitar course which I have available for anyone that is new to learning jazz guitar. I've put this jazz guitar course together to break down jazz guitar in a coherent and structured way. Well, the main things that separate this in sound and feel from a Gibson 335 are the fact that it's completely hollow, so there is no centre block at all on this guitar, which makes it extremely light, quite resonant and great to play on the couch, great to practice on. The second thing is that it has P90s, which also give it a unique and articulate tone, whereas 335s always come with humbuckers. On this specific model, this is a 1967, so I guess it shares a lot of similar spec to maybe a 64 or a 65. They had the narrower nut width on these later models, which I actually really like. It feels really comfortable. I know some people don't like that, but for me, I can get around this neck very fast, very comfortably, and it is no problem. The hardware, I believe, is chrome. I think they originally came with nickel hardware, but they switched to chrome because, as you can see, even though this guitar is so old, the hardware actually looks really clean. And I think that's the thing about chrome, is it doesn't rust, so that's why they use chrome there. Other than that, everything else is original. It's got the original pick guard. It's in really good shape. It's got some nice natural relicking and age in there on the sides. If you can see that, the binding on the fingerboard is actually kind of starting to yellow a bit as well. It's got block inlays. I think that 330s switched to block inlays in the early 60s. If you enjoyed that guitar tone, I'll put a screenshot on screen now of the GarageBand amp and pedals which I used. I don't really think I changed anything about the stock setting on this. I just wanted something that was kind of lightly distorted, more overdriven than distorted, and not too heavy. So the reason why I like the 330 for this more than like a 335 or a Strat or a Tele is that back bridge P90 has much more mid-range than a Strat or even a Telecaster back pickup. Both of those guitars can sound pretty good, but I'll post an audio clip now of either a Strat or a Tele so you can hear that against the 330 bridge pickup. The 330 back pickup is particularly good for rock rhythm sounds. Anything that's Malcolm Young flavoured or maybe even Pete Townsend flavoured sounds absolutely wonderful on that back pickup. It's got articulation, mid-range, and it really cuts through in a mix. So I think it's a great guitar for that classic rock style of playing. The next ES-330 tone that I think you should check out is a retro blues tone. Let's have a listen to a clip of that now. Historically, blues guitar players have used all kinds of guitars. There's obviously 335 players, Tele players, Strat players, and perhaps not many 330 players, but I think it really makes a great guitar. I do believe that Slim Harpo used one, and for me that's where the ES-330 really excels, is in that kind of old school retro blues. I mean, it would be a good kind of blues rock guitar for sure, but that kind of, whenever you put a tremolo or a Leslie speaker or anything like that with this guitar, and you mix it with the articulation of the P90s, it really is a fantastic blues guitar tone, both for single line playing and also rhythm guitar playing, which is what I've demonstrated in the clip there. The last 330 tone, which I think every guitar player should check out, is a jazz guitar tone. These are absolute jazz beasts, and this is the main reason why I switched from a 335 to a 330. Now, there are obviously wonderful players that use a 335 for jazz, and it has to be said that in maybe louder or heavier gain settings, a 335 may be more useful. However, the jazz player Terry Smith actually used a 330 in the band If for a while. For me, these sound like a jazz guitar. They sound almost like an archtop, but they've got a lot of punch and a lot of fatness in the sound. So that's why I like to use them, especially if you've got any kind of organ trio type of band. Then the punch and the articulation that you get from that neck P90 really cuts through and works well. So let's have a listen to a short example of me using one in an organ trio mix. I'd now like to discuss some of my 330 players, famous players that use this guitar and achieve some wonderful sounds with them. The first one that I think comes to mind when you think about a Gibson 330 is Grant Green. It's quite funny because at the time I think he was working for Blue Note Records and he recorded a lot around that time in the early 60s, and a lot of people heavily attribute this guitar to him. However, he actually only used this guitar for around 18 months or less. There just happened to be a lot of photos and recordings around that time. So that's a popular kind of myth that I think some people get wrong. If you hear any of his recordings from the late 60s onwards, then there are various other guitars which he used. However, despite all that, this guitar is really closely associated with Grant Green, and there are some great photos from around that time of Grant Green using them. And it's interesting to note that he actually tied the guitar strap to the head of the guitar like Wes Montgomery and George Benson did. The next 330 player that you should check out is a lesser known English jazz guitar player called Terry Smith. Terry Smith used a 330 in the 60s and 70s. The album that you need to get by him is called Fallout. There is a picture of Terry Smith with a 330 on the front and back, and it's an excellent example of the 330 in a good jazz player's hands. He has a particularly unique tone on that recording because in a later interview he said that he actually strung up his 330 with heavy flat wound strings and used ivory picks. The next player that you should check out is the late, great Emily Remler. Emily Remler also played different guitars, so she's not an exclusive 330 player, but there are some wonderful album covers and clips on YouTube of her using a 330. She had one with a vibrato unit, and she also, interestingly, had the P90s swapped for humbuckers. What surprises me is on her beautiful cherry red 330 with humbuckers, the sound isn't that different to my ears compared to having P90s, so it sometimes makes me question how much the hollowness of the 330 has to do with the guitar sound. The last player is perhaps more associated with the Fender Telecaster. Indeed, most of the clips that you'll see are of Ted Green using the Telecaster, but he was an avid collector and player of Guild guitars, Gibson 330s, all kinds of things. I just wanted to mention him because there's a wonderful seminar of him on YouTube from around 20-25 years ago of him using a 330 for most of the seminar, and it's a wonderful example of an early 60s, maybe even late 50s. I think it's a long guard that it might have on. I'll have to double check, but it's one of the earlier 330 models with the black P90s and the dots on the neck rather than the block inlays. That concludes the video on the ES-330. This is why I prefer it to the 335 and some of my favourite sounds. What do you think about the Gibson ES-330? Do you prefer the 335? Please share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this in the future.